All right, well, let's not waste any time. We're going to pull that drivetrain out. I'm going to start by pulling the whole front clip off the car. I'm going to pull that hood off. You wouldn't have to do that normally, but that hood's kind of a junker, so it's going to end up in scrap anyway. So I'm going to pull that off, just give myself a little bit more room, pull the front clip off, and then in no time at all, you'll see that we have the whole drivetrain out. Let's get started. Those of you that have taken apart the front end on a B6 before, you know that normally you don't take the cover off and then take your rebar off. You just undo the 2 bolts that hold the rebar, pull the whole assembly out together. But somebody's been in here before me and hasn't done a great job putting it back together. So when I tried to get that bolt out, it was not having it. So I decided to take the cover off and go from there. And I also discovered we got some nice air horns here. So sweet. So what's next? That's all you wanted to do? Don't really have a plan.
Does the motor run?
Yeah, it ran.
Oh yeah, we drove this one home from Quebec.
Yeah.
Right. We got a flat tire on the way home.
Did you?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, this thing broke.
Is there a crack in that wheel?
Yeah.
Right, it's not when I was talking on the phone.
So we were driving it.
Repaired.
Yeah.
And then I hit a bump, and this thing has no suspension. So I hit the bump, and it was like.
And I'm behind him, and all I see is like a pile of dirt dispersed, and I'm like, where did the dirt come from? And then he pulls off to the side, and I'm like, oh great.
Will that pick it up?
Yeah. Yeah. Should.
Those are the ugliest rims I've ever seen in my life.
Honestly, for me, for fixing this thing up is just to be like, just show up at Blake's house and have it driving and running nice and like faster than his, and finished, and like. Be like, you didn't want this thing, bruh, bruh. Part of me wants to do this thing just at NA though, because they sound so nice.
Yeah. What's NA mean?
Naturally aspirated.
Mm.
Build the little
Like,
exhaust for it.
Yeah, just have a nice exhaust on it.
Yeah.
You know, open up the intake if I can.
Does that mean using the same engine?
Yeah, slap this bad boy back in, like give it a once over, clean bill of health, slap it back in because it needs a new flywheel.
Are you gonna put a super flywheel on? Like super fly, not
that lightweight flywheel is the worst thing.
Is there a fire extinguisher in here?
There's 4 fire extinguishers in here.
Come on, where are they? Are they mounted?
No, they're under the press over there. There's like 3 big ones and a little one just over there. I know exactly where they are.
Good.
And I'll also show you that I have one right here in the passenger seat.
Sean.
Also.
Yeah, I remember that guy.
Because it was like, the thing might catch on fire on your way home.
Legit.
So you might. This was legit. Look, it's in the full range.
Yeah, but
Look.
does it?
Full.
How many fires has he had in the garage?
Yeah.
Never.
I almost burnt the place down the other day. So now that we have this big hunk of metal out of there, the next step's going to be to pull off that transmission, and I'm going to start, before I actually go ahead and undo the bell housing bolts, pull the transmission off, I'm going to get rid of a lot of this accessory stuff from the motor just to make it a little bit easier to get at. I'll get rid of these cats, pull this subframe off, motor mounts off, take the axles out, and basically make everything a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to work with, and a little bit easier to get at, so that I can get at those bell housing bolts and pull that whole transmission off, because the car did have quite a bit of vibration, and I think that's probably because the flywheel or the pressure plate may have failed. The clutch did some really weird things, and the transmission was a little bit weird going into gear as well. So I think it's going to be pressure plate or flywheel, and the only way to find out is going to be to take that all apart and have a look at it. now that we have the transmission off, we can see a lot of play here. This is where that dual mass flywheel is coming apart. That's going to be the source of our vibration when the motor was running, and funny clutch issues and stuff like that. So it's good to find that. That way we know that there's probably not anything wrong with the motor, at least not causing that huge vibration. So it's a good thing to find. So you can see here, with the flywheel being broken, the surface is actually walked a little bit, and the center, I noticed that the clutch disc wasn't centered in the pressure plate and in the flywheel when I took the transmission off, but I thought maybe I had just shifted it a bit with the transmission when I was manhandling it. Turns out, so that because that flywheel's broken, everything's kind of spinning out around, and that's definitely where that vibration's coming from. You can see there's some damage, and even on the pressure plate here, you can see where it's been sitting against the edge of this little retaining cage here, and it's worn into there and left it blue from the heat. So, and yeah, quite a bit of damage over here on the fingers too. So unfortunately, even though this looks like it was almost a brand new clutch, because the disc is in pretty good shape, and the pressure plate looks good too, but you know, unfortunately with that flywheel breaking, I've had a little bit of bad luck, and I'm gonna have to replace everything. So that's a bit of a bummer. Another thing you can notice here, you can see these marks on the flywheel. It looks like somebody came in here with a grinder or a really aggressive sanding disc and tried to clean up that surface. So I think this is just a case of, you know, a clutch replacement without doing the flywheel as well. They tried to reuse the probably original dual mass flywheel here, and ended up with a flywheel, the failure just after they had changed the clutch, and unfortunately that damaged the clutch parts. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to walk each one of these bolts out sort of an equal amount a little bit, because as they come out they're hitting this little centerpiece. So I'm trying to walk them each out individually a little bit so that the whole flywheel is kind of moving off as one unit, because I can't actually get those bolts straight out the hole. So as we look at the back of this motor, we can see that the rear main seal here looks to be healthy. We're not seeing any oil coming out, any signs of oil seeping out from that. We do see a bunch of oil coming out from the back of these heads though, where the cam position sensors are. Interesting thing about the 3 liter as opposed to like the 2.7s or the 1.8T, these have 2 cam position sensors on each head, whereas the other styles of motor have just 1 cam position sensor at the front of the head. That's because these cams can be adjusted individually, but basically we're seeing a bunch of oil from there, so we're going to replace the seals on those cam position sensor blocks and the valve cover gaskets as well. But otherwise, you know, everything looks pretty healthy back here, so that's a good sign.